Okay, now I think we should start our session. Okay. Okay, so yeah, so we'll start the today's session. So okay, so on behalf of Tibet Museum of Central Tibetan Administration, so I would like to pay a very warm greetings to all the participants through online and over here physically who have joined here. So very good evening to all of you. So I am Atsing Norbu, and I'm glad to be hosting this event for you all today. And the Tibet Museum has been hosting this kind of events every twice a month by inviting the researchers and scholars and then the other Tibet's experts, mainly to raise the awareness about the Tibet and its current critical situations, and then why so many Tibetans are forced to flee from their lands, Tibet, and why so many Tibetan people are sacrificing their life by burning themselves to protest against the Communist Chinese Party. So to raise awareness about all these things, so we are hosting such kind of events. So this is our kind of the main aims and objective of having this kind of events. And as of today, we have and we are very and honored to have Mr. Claude Arpi uh, to talk about the India-Tibet relations, specifically the period time between the 1947 to 1962. I'm sure this kind of period of time has been a very tense situation for those Tibetans at that time, and Mr. Claude will talk about this on this topic today. And then, if I talk a little bit about today's our guest speaker, Mr. Claude Arpi, so he is an overseas citizen of India and was born in France in the year 1949. So the Claude has been his quest started in the 1972 with a journey to Indian Himalayas. Since then, he has been an enthusiastic student of the history of Tibet, China, and then the subcontinent. So after Mr. Claude Arpi regularly writes on the geopolitics of the region, the environment, and then the Indo-French relations. So for 4 years, he held the Field Marshal K.M. Cariappa Chair of Excellence of the United Service Institution of the India for his four long volume history of India-Tibet relations during the 1947 to 62. And he's the author of the several other books, especially including the books like the McMahon Line saga, and he also has written more than 2,000 articles on the Tibet, India, China, and related issues. So, and currently he is doing a research on the boundary question between the India and China. So yeah, so this is a bit introduction about our guest speaker of the today, Mr. Claude Arpi. And then before proceeding further, I would like to request to all the participants online to kindly make sure that your microphone should be on mute mode while our presenter started his presentation. And if you have kind of your internet is not that good, then you can mute the video mode. You can still enjoy the with the audio mode, so that the internet speed compromisation you won't be there. And then the speaker, Mr. Claude Arby, will speak on his topic for 35 minutes. And then after that, we have like a 10 minutes for question answer session. So, and again, my humbly request to all of you that kindly ask the question as short as possible. That's because of the time limited we have. So now, without taking much time, I would like to hand over the session to Mr. Claude Arpi. Kindly start the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanan.
Thank you, Claude.
Okay, so I'm grateful to the museum for inviting me to present this very crucial period for the Tibet. It's the period during which Tibet lost its independence. That's why I was very keen. I worked for several years, more than 4 or 5 years, to record this period because Tibet lost independence at that time. So that is the object of the four books that I've written with the USI under the chair Karyapa. But before I start from 1947, I would like to just say a word about 1914 because whatever is happening today on the border, especially in the northeast, in Arunachal Pradesh, depends on one treaty which was signed by independent Tibet with British India. You see on that map of the McMahon line the seal of Sir Henry McMahon, who was the Foreign Secretary of India in 1914, and Lochen Taipa, the Prime Minister of Tibet and the special envoy of His Holiness the 13th Dalai Lama for the talks in Shimla, which ended with China not ratifying. But this particular map China was never asked to sign because China was nowhere near the border. So this period 47 to 1962, it's a tragedy for the Tibetans because they lost their country. Ultimately, His Holiness and his followers had to take refuge in India. But it's also a great tragedy for India because India lost a very peaceful border. Now, the setup in 1947, that picture on the top is Dekilinka. Dekilinka was the office and residence of the head of the mission in Lhasa. First, it was a full-fledged mission, like an embassy when Tibet was independent till August. On the bottom, you have Mr. Richardson. Richardson had been working for the British, but at the time of independence, India had no officers able to take over. So they asked Mr. Richardson to work for 3 years on contract as the head of the mission in Lhasa. He left in August 1950. Now, India had a strong representation in Tibet. Till 52, full-fledged mission, later on consul general, but also very importantly for all the Himalayan region, the trade agency. It's called ITA, Indian Trade Agency. Officers were posted there, one in Yamse, which was connecting to Lhasa, very important one in Yamse, and as importantly in Gatok, which was controlling the entire trade of the Himalaya of the state, which is today the Uttarakhand, as well as Ladakh. And this was very important because the entire population of this area were living by the trade with Tibet. So that was the setup at that time, and in 1947. Um, India was controlling or monitoring this trade agency as well as the mission in Lhasa through the political officer in Sikkim. Here you have the photo, a very senior officer, Mr. Harishwar Dayal, was from the ICS, the Indian Service, Civil Service, before the IAS or the IFS. Mr. Harishwar Dayal for three years was the head of the mission in Gangtok and was controlling all the NIFA, Northeast Frontier Agency, as well as the trade agency, as well as the mission in Lhasa. You have that photo, that very beautiful bungalow in Yatong, which is the residence and office of the Indian Trade Agency in Yatong. And at the bottom, you have a photo of the escort. India had a military presence in Tibet till 1954-55. the Maratha Light Infantry Regiment and later on the Dutch Regiment as 50 or so soldiers and officers posted in Tibet. They were called the escort. The middle photo, there's Mr. Kumul Sinha who replaced Richardson. And there's Mr. Galudunduk on one side, and Mr. Wiltotachi was His Holiness brother-in-law on the other side. And at that time, a lot of visitors came, and independent visitors, and you have the famous journalist Lord Thomas who visited Tibet in 1949. So at that time, at the time of India's independence, Tibet was fully independent. One of the signs of an independent country is that you're able to run your own.
Uh, Claude, okay. Hello. Sorry for the interruption. Claude, we can't hear properly. We can't hear you properly.
I don't know, I put the mic.
Okay,
Can
okay.
you hear me?
Now it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, now it's fine.
Okay, and so that trade had been going on for centuries. And the interesting side was that there was no uh, custom house, there was no border police, there was no army, and the traders were just going from one side to another. Tibetan traders were coming on the Indian side, and Indian traders were going to the Indian trade mart and the Indian trade agencies. And Ladakh in particular, they had that caravan every 3 years called Lakshak, who brought goods from Ladakh to Tibet. And interestingly, it was run by a Muslim family, the Radu. And so it was continuously going, not only the trade, but also the monks and were going from Ladakh or from Kinor or from Spiti and going and studying in Tibet. And once again, no police, no army, nothing. So it's what I think India lost during this period, 1947, or mainly 1959, 1962. And you see that village in Uttarakhand, Bartoli, which is in Dharma Valley, in Pithoragarh district, that village completely dead. And it's why one of the reasons why many, several hundred villages in Uttarakhand today are ghost village. Because the entire activity of these villages was depending on the trade with Tibet. Not only that, but India had a small principality, a small village which belonged to the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and people living there were not Tibet. I mean, they were Tibetan ethnically, but they were subject of the Jammu and Kashmir state, and they were paying their tax to the Jammu and Kashmir and not to the Tibetan government. Of course, when Chinese came, they stopped that paying of the taxes to the GNK government, but technically, legally, this village of Minsar is still part of the Union of India. It's located very close to the Kailash um, mountain, and it was since 17th century through a treaty between Ladakh and Tibet, it has been agreed that this village would be part of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, at the time of partition, as you know, Lord Mountbatten on June 3rd, 1947, said that on August 15, India would be free and the subcontinent would be partitioned and the British would leave the subcontinent. Now, there was an interim government, and that interim government wrote to Lhasa to the government of Tibet, the independent government of Tibet. And they said the government of India would be glad to have an assurance that it is the intention of the government of Tibet to continue the relation on the existing basis until new arrangements are reached on matters that either party may wish to take up. This is a procedure adopted by all countries with which India inherited treaty relations from His Majesty's government. So at that time, Tibet was fully independent. The government of India acknowledged it by this letter. Unfortunately, very unfortunately, the Tibetan government refused to answer that letter, and it took 11 months. So I have detailed in one of chapters of the book why the Tibetan refused. They start claiming some lost territory. They start claiming Tawang. They start claiming Darjeeling, Kalimpong, some parts of Ladakh. And I think the Tibetan government at that time was not knowledgeable what's happening in the world, was not knowledgeable about the legal facts that which between two states and how it was working, and they used that opportunity in India independence to claim these so-called lost territories. And when I asked His Holiness many years ago, some 20 years ago, he said, yes, it is my strong feeling at that time the Tibetan government should have sent a strong delegation to celebrate the Indian independence. Of course, it was a big mistake. And in some way, the Nehru government got very upset with this, and it put the relation between Tibet and India on the wrong path from the start. Now, in 1949, August 1st, a new regime came in China. Mao Zedong and the communists took over, and from Tiananmen Square, he said that he declared the People's Republic of China had been founded. Few months later, 2 months later, Mao Zedong annexed Xinjiang and came at the gate of Ladakh of India, and in one place, Shabibula, and that was in December of 1949. And in October of 1950, the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, invaded Tibet. They crossed the Yangtze. They invaded eastern Tibet, Kham, and they also came from Chining, from what is Shanghai today. But the main force came from Yan'an and Chengdu and Shanxi, and it was the 18th Army. And interestingly, also in western Tibet, in Ari area, only 135 cavalrymen invaded Tibet. So it shows at that time there was not really resistance. Resistance happened only around Chamdo. It lasted 1 week, and the governor of Chamdo, Abu Nawang Jime, was taken prisoner of war and taken to Beijing, where he negotiated, inverted comma, the 17 points agreements. At that time, when it happens in October, November 1950, India sent 2 letters regretting Chinese action. So that was not enough to stop Mao Zedong. I think at that time, some officers in the government of India, like Harishwar Dayal that I mentioned, the PO in Sikkim, has suggested that stronger action, that Indian army could intervene, brigade could be sent in southern Tibet and help the Tibetans, but it was absolutely rejected by the Prime Minister, that was very upset by this sort of proposal because he already believed in the friendship, so-called eternal friendship with China. So the regrets were not enough. And one important factor that Sardar Patel, who was the deputy prime minister, who understood the implication for the Indian border as well as for the Tibetan people, passed away 1 month later on 15th of December 1950. But by the time between October and December, by the time Sardar Patel passed away, he created a border committee under the chairmanship of their Imad Singhvi was Deputy Defense Minister of India, and they decided that to implement whatever has been decided in 1914 and to advance towards the McMahon line. So an expedition from phase 4 to Tawang was organized, and on February 9 of 1951, Bob Keating, a very good officer from Naga origin, who was serving with the Assam Rifle, and two Assam Rifles took over the administration of Mount Tawang, and without firing, he pacified Tawang, and today Tawang is part of India because of this. Otherwise, China would have invaded. I must say that China didn't realize about the border with India till the mid 50s. So in that way, India moved very fast in this area, but diplomatically went very slow on China. And when the 17 points agreement was signed in May, I think the date is wrong, it's 21st of 1951, the government of India did say nothing, though the article first said the Tibetan people should return to the big family of the motherland. That it implied for India to new neighbors and at the border, and not a peaceful neighbor like Tibet has been for centuries. And 3 weeks later, during a press conference, Prime Minister Nehru was very vague. He said the only account that we had were some celebration in Beijing, celebration in the sense of some meeting or some other occasion after signing the treaty. It was celebrated by toast by various people, including both the Dalai Lama and the Panchen Lama. But actually, the Nehru knew exactly what had happened because the ambassador of India in Beijing, KM Panikkar, had informed, but they prefer not to know what was happening. And in many, 2 or 3 of my books, I really describe in detail the action of KM Panikkar, the ambassador, which for me had been, if we call it the villain of the story, to really put down Tibet and make sure that China got it what they wanted. So once the agreement was signed, Mao had envisioned in two parts. The first military operation, which lasted 1 week in October of 1950, and later on signed so-called diplomatic move, action, and signing the 17 points agreement. So 5, 6 months later, I think again there's a mistake, it's September 1950, the PLA entered Lhasa, and Deng Wu came via the Chumbi Valley, where he met the Dalai Lama, where the meeting didn't go so well, and he don't have the reverence he should have had for His Holiness, but he was the representative of Mao Zedong and the Central Committee, and he ruled Tibet for several years thereafter. So Tibet is occupied, and India don't react, or react so mildly that China had a sort of a green light. But that's not all. When some between 15, 20,000 troops reach Lhasa, suddenly there's not enough food because over the century, Tibet has always been self-sufficient in food, and there was never issue of having starvation. It has never been heard in Tibet. But with the arrival of 20,000 PLA in Tibet, suddenly there's not enough food. And the most incredible thing that the government of India for 3 years supplied rice via the Chumbi Valley and as well Dalepla and Natula. They supplied rice to the Chinese army. So I think it's in the annal of military history, it's the first time that the country supplied the food of the country which is going to be its enemy in the years to come. So that was really one more blunder from the government of India. But by that time, everyone was convinced of indeed China bye-bye. So China immediately started to build roads. The first action they did after entering Lhasa in September 51 was to build roads, build roads toward China and build roads and toward the Indian border. Means Chumbi Valley, Ladakh side, and Sona as well as Rohit side, Rima. So these roads were quite. Chinese has been always quite remarkable at doing this road. They are doing today these new railway lines, this tunneling, these new bridges. I mean, they have always a tradition of really great infrastructure builder. So one way I can say that's something extraordinary. That Xi Jinping called the miracle of highway construction. By end of December 1954, the road from Qinghai to Tibet, means from Xining, Golmun, Nakshu, and Lhasa was built, and the road from Sichuan to Tibet, from Chengdu, Yan'an, Kangse, and Chamdo, and Lhasa were built. So it changed absolutely everything because for India, we had been supplying goods to the traders, um, Nivale or Uttarakhand. Now, these trades start disappearing because with the road, Chinese could bring by trucks all the supplies from the mainland. And it helped them also to bring more troops, to bring all necessary goods. So this really changed totally the stake. And for India, suddenly the border became very sensitive. And you all know about the Panchil, the five principles. But the most important part for me of that agreement in 1954, I've written one book called Panchil Born in Sin. It was a sin because India dropped Tibet, acknowledged the invasion, the occupation of Tibet by the People's Republic of China. And the title of the agreement is Agreement between the Republic of India and the People's Republic of China on trade intercourse between Tibet region of China and, and India. Tibet region of China, it was the first time it was mentioned officially in an agreement. It was an acknowledgement that Tibet was no more an independent country on with the signature of the Indian ambassador Raghavan in Beijing. India acknowledged that Tibet was no more independent nation. And that cartoon of Shankar showed that 3 months after the signature, all the incursion into the violation of the Indian territory started. So you see that India did really a favor in surrendering all of rights. For example, India was looking after this post, the telegraph, their dark bungalow, the postal bungalow where people could stay. One of these, they're all very beautiful buildings. India gave away all these advantages. Didn't fix the border with occupied Tibet and got in return only violation of its own territory. So Dayama went to Peking in 1954-55, and he had a meeting with Nehru, who was at that time who came on a visit to Peking. And His Holiness told me one time Nehru was introduced, His Holiness was introduced to Nehru by Chou Enlai, and Nehru stayed without a word, speaking totally silent for 1 or 2 minutes, and His Holiness said that it was not a very good omen. He couldn't say a word in front. Maybe at that time Nehru realized what India had done to Tibet. But life went on, the trade started diminishing, less and less trade, but still monks from Ladakh area, Kushok Bakula, and Satsangrepa, Miss Gompa, there was 500 Ladakhi monks. There was monks also from Nontawang, from progressively they returned back because the Chinese wanted to reduce the population of this monastery. And that map is interesting because today China is claiming the entire Arunachal as Chinese territory, but this map, restricted map of 1945, the British map, shows only about 10% of Arunachal today was under Tibetan influence, means that there's Tibetan monastery. Like you can say that Sikkim is Tibetan influence of Sinol or even Ladakh. So that was non Taiwan, that was Panchachari, which means Manchukuo, that was Upper Siang district and Loit district of Arunachal today. 1956, His Holiness tried very hard to find a solution. Twilight came twice to India when His Holiness was there, His Holiness Panchamanam also was there, to try to stop the Dalai Lama to take refuge at that time because there was a lot of pressure from many Tibetans that His Holiness should just take refuge in 1956. But Twilight promised Nehru that he will not change, he will not introduce what they call the reforms, but actually it didn't happen. And by that time, India realized that the border was a life border. It won't be a border anymore like it has been for centuries, a peaceful border where people could cross without any uh, papers. You don't have a registration paper or anything with your identity on. Everyone could go one side or another. And India started that Indian frontier administrative with a quite remarkable officers. I think someone should write a book on this administrative service. They were very close to the people. They were learning the language. They were eating with the people, and they did very good to start the administration in this very remote place of the Himalaya. In 1959, you know what has happened in March 10. And what is interesting during my research that I found, and I was very happy because sometimes you spend years to do research in very boring files, and sometimes you find something extraordinary. And I found a report from the Indian Consul General in Lhasa, and he describes in detail what happened between March 10 and March 19 when the revolt was uprising was finished. It's very clearly a mass uprising of it. It's the masses, what the communists call the masses, who revolted against the Chinese. It's not the clergy or the aristocracy, it's the masses. And China never acknowledged this. Till today, they are celebrating March 28th as the Serb Emancipation Day. They say the Serb has been emancipation. That is a pure lie. It's the Consul General in NASA's long report shows that it's massive. It's the so-called Serbs, what we call the Chinese call the Serbs, who revolted against. And the battle lasted for 9 days, mainly against Novolinka and Chakpori, and as well as Ramoche. According to some Chinese records, 87,000 people died during these few months of 59. On March 17, His Holiness left the Novolinka. He walked to Sona area, to Rumse, and later on took refuge in India, and where he entered on 31st March. And now, it deeply upset China when His Holiness received a guard of honor by the Assam Rifle in Tawang. And he was received by the Indian official, the assistant political officer at the border, and later on Mr. Amanda Singh, the political officer in Lumla, and who escorted him to Bombela and Testu. When His Holiness, after staying a few days in Testu, went and moved to Masari, Nehru came. They had 4 hours discussion. It was rather tough discussion. The tone used by the Prime Minister was not always very nice. Nevertheless, um, Nehru said, we give asylum to all the Tibetans, the His Holiness first, and all his followers, whoever will come to India will be received, um, but no political support for Tibet. And that's why India refused to stand by Tibet in the UN. That refused in November 1950, but also when in 59 and 61. And 65 it changed when Albado Shastri was the prime minister. India supported the cause of Tibet in the UN. And but Nehru said education and rehabilitation for all Tibetans will be provided by the government of India, and this the government of India really did it. And I think if there's so many Tibetan educators today in exile, it's because of that decision. But politically, though it's changing slowly, it has not no support has ever come from the government of India. From Misamari in Assam and to Dharamsala, first Missouri and Dharamsala. I took that picture in 1972. Now, 50 years, my first visit, my first meeting with His Holiness. 50 years is a very long time, but at that time, it's where the School of Dialectics was, and to show something, Geshe-la was following His Holiness to see he has one PSO and one very, it's not like today. And also, my podcast is slightly different today. So I will not comment further. But the government of India has helped really this rehabilitation and the education, but not politically. But the arrival of His Holiness started making this border with Tibet live, and already in August 1959, means 3 months, 4 months after the arrival of His Holiness, first four place became disputed. One in Kazimane, north of Tawang, one is Cathay, one is the Longju, and on the Sarichu River, and one is Tamadan. So these places are still today disputed, and in the first incident, serious incident, took place in August 59. So very shortly after His Holiness crossed the border, and I think China wanted to make a point, they attacked the Assam rifle in Longju and killed several of the Assam rifles. More recently, the same place, China has built a village. I think NDTV and some other channel have spoke about it and done broadcast about it. They have done one of these Chalcong village, which is technically in, on India territory, but very close from the Macmahon line. And more recently, 2 3 weeks ago, the Chinese Panchen Lama, the Gyatsen Nobu, the Panchen Lama elected by China after failing the genuine one, visited that place. I think it was a message for India that, that the border is alive and something could happen in that area like it has happened in 2020 in Ladakh. And something interesting to conclude,
Okay.
because that war of 1962, that border war between China and India, Mao Zedong had envisaged it much before, 3 years before, even before the uprising in Lhasa in February 1959. He wrote some report about the situation of Tibet. He said rebellion is a good thing. It could be used to train the troops and the masses, to harden our troops to combat readiness. Mao Zedong's concept was suppress the rebellion while training the PLA troops. It means that with one thought he was killing two birds. He was suppressing the Tibetan rebellion, the Tibetan group, especially in Loka and other areas of Tibet, and at the same time training for the future war with India, which took place 3 years later. He sent this instruction to Liu Shaoqi, who was the president, Chen Xiaoping, the general secretary of the party, and defense minister Fang Jian. So, and their instructions were sent also to Tibet, to the military, And I have 1 more minute. So I think
Yes.
one of the Tibet factor um, in the 1962 is the deep resentment of the Tibetans inside Tibet, particularly after the 70,000 character petition of the Panchen Lama. And that's why China, the PLA, stay only one month in India and peace too. And I want to finish by I think one of the implications of the 62 war was the creation of the Special Frontier Force. And I want just to pay homage to the Vikassis who fought so well recently in August of 2020 and helped India. So for India, I think it has been important that Vikassis and all the present, you have the spiritual presence of His Holiness, but at the same time, the army presence have helped tremendously India. So I think that's all. Maybe I've got 1 minute too
Uh,
much.
yeah.
How many minutes? 1 minute extra.
1 minute, yeah, extra. It's okay. Yeah,
One
perfect.
minute, that's not much.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Claude. So yeah, due to the time limit, so I will move on to the question answer session. So if any one of you have questions to ask, please.
Happy for providing us a historical perspective of the 1947 onwards. It's really very interesting and the hard work you have put in. I have a very limited question from the historical uh, perspective. Like in 1947, when the Britishers left, apart from partition of Bengal and Punjab, they have left the choice of each princely state. They have to exercise the choice to whether to join India or to declare themselves independent. Means that they have not declared as such India as independent or any other country as independent. They left all the princely states, more than 560, to decide their own fate. So my question is, at that time, whether Tibet at that time has any time expressed its independence, or whether the British documents states anything specifically while leaving India that Tibet is an independent country. First question is that, and the second limited part is that Nepal do has a border with Tibet. So whether that the Nepal has at any stage or Tibet or Nepal at any stage has mentioned about the independence of or independent country as Tibet. So these two aspects, if you have any historical perspective from that. Thank you very much.
I think, as I mentioned earlier, that Tibet was considered by the government of India as independent in 1952. I think the mission was downgraded as a consulate general. It lost independence. It was formalized by the Panchil Agreement. But I've written a book many 20, 30 years, 25 years ago, the karma of Tibet. It's very strange that many states got independent. We don't have all the sign of an independent nation like Tibet had till 1952. And but something happened that you see the fact that, for example, that Sardar Patel passed away just 2 months after the military operation started in Sham was something which is very tragic. And it would have, if Sardar Patel would have lived, I think it would have been different. Because what I found in some of the archive and interviewing people, that most of the ministers, Congress minister of Nehru, including the President Rajendra Prasad and K. Monchi and Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, they were all in favor of doing something to defend Tibet. But once the leader Patel passed away, that was over. Nepal had a relation with Tibet, but they don't have the you see, if a big country like India, they don't stand by Tibet. Nepal was forced in 1956 to sign an agreement with People's Republic of China, and that was over. Though they had also an old agreement. The British knew everything. The British absolutely, if you go to the British archive, they knew that Tibet was an independent. In 1949, in London, the British Parliament passed resolution saying that they stood by the statement given in 1943 saying that Tibet is independent. So till July of 49, absolutely, but also nobody wanted to go and fight the war. So they left everything to India. They say now you have stepped in our shoes, you deal with the issue. And nobody in UN, nobody really wanted to pick up a war. In November 1950, India stayed in the UN. We will find a peaceful solution. And some scholars, Canadian scholars, maybe 20 years ago, she passed away now. Claudia Johnson, she did a research in the UN, and she found that it's still pending today. The case of Tibet of November 1950 is still pending today in the UN. But who has the guts or the courage, or maybe someone one day, Nancy Pelosi or someone will raise the issue. But it's still pending. It should be known it's still pending in the UN. But someone has to go and take the matter.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Claude. Last.
Interested by the report that you mentioned, the report from the Indian Consul General in Hassa about the mass uprising. I was wondering if we would be able to have access to that report. And to be greedy and add another question, what would be, taking in view the current political, geopolitical scenario, what would be the possibility for India in providing or agreeing to, finally providing political support for that issue? Thank you.
Regarding the major accessible report, I think it's on my blog and as well as on my website. So if you tell Shiva, you will find it's more or less the entire thing is there. Future is very difficult to decide to say about India what stand, but it's certain that India's stand is slowly changing. Like His Holiness has been very well received in Ladakh. That's why the Chinese Pancham Lama was invited in places like Sona and Lomse and Longju. But if you look at the picture of the Chinese Pancham Lama, there's about 20, 25 people. How many tens of thousands Ladakhi and Tibetan refugees have received His Holiness from the Leh airport to the Ramsa or wherever he is residing. So you see the differences. I think it is also noted in today. So government of India, for example, provided air force helicopter to go in remote places in what is it, in Nubra Valley. So slowly, small things like to expect that one day the parliament will vote something like the Americans, because it's more difficult for the government of India in the sense that there's a border, there's a confrontation in Ladakh, there's 50,000, 60,000 Indian Jawan and officer posts in front of the Chinese. Chinese have modernized, they are doing 2, 3 roads across the extension. But to stand when you are a little bit more difficult and it will take more time. But small thing will be slowly adding, and we have seen it over the last few months, especially after the Dogram incident and after the confrontation as well and COVID, which is come from the Wuhan virus institute in China. So the government of India and even the words of Dr. Jaishankar, the minister, are much stronger than they used to be. But it will not. It doesn't mean immediately change of policy in the sense that will recognize Dharamsala also. But slowly, small policy will adapt and will change the situation.
Thank you so much to share your thoughts.
So, okay, thank you so much. So, with this, we'll conclude our today's session. and hopefully Claudia will meet one day in a real physical and have one more kind of like talk series
Yes,
on another topic. Thank you for your enlightening about the session about regarding the Tibet-India relation, especially during the 1947 to 62. Thank you so much. So I can see some of the questions that have left over there in the comment section, but I can't go with those questions because of the time limit. And then now I would like to, before concluding, I would like to call upon our museum director, Mr. Tenzin Doptenla, to say some few words on the thank you note as a thank you note and conclude this meeting. Thank you so much.
So, first of all, can we have a big round of applause to Mr. Claude Arpi? He's, as you see, he's a staunch supporter of Tibet, as he's flying the Tibetan flag very high in the sky. And as Senol has already, explained to you that he's a scholar, historian, the author, as well as the Tibetologist. But to me, apart from that, I believe that he's a courageous writer, because for more than half century he has written close to around 2000 articles particularly in the geopolitical nuances of this triangular nation, particularly the writing the truth and the reality, ground reality of these three nations, the India, China and Tibet. So on behalf of the Tibet Museum, Mr. Claude, I would like to thank for accepting our invitation, even though it has been virtual this time. But as we discuss in the near future, and he's also hopeful that he will be visiting here in the museum and taking part in our talk series. And I think that will enlighten all of us through his knowledge and the experience that he has. To know more about the Claude Arpi, I will leave you with these three website. The first one is the claudearpi.net. So you can find more about his books that he have published, the exhibition that he have hosted and co-hosted with other the partner, and also you can find the interviews and the archive in this website. And the second one is the blogs and the article. They are close to around more than 2000 plus articles that he have written, and primarily on this triangular nation. And as he has already shown us, the recent article was on the visit of the fake Panchen Lama to the upper part of Arunachal. And also he has written about the Xi Jinping visit to the Xinjiang, the autonomous region. So Claude, once again, thank you so much. And also, last but not the least, I would like to thank all the participants, both virtually as well as physically, Dr. Emma Martin La and Mr. and Miss Raina and our friend. Thank you so much for coming, and I'll conclude here. And after this, we have a refreshment at the reception. So yeah, thank you, Claude. Thank you once again.